Welcome back, I guess. Yeah, today we're gonna be looking at Javed Iqbal, the man who dipped his bread in the blood of children. Let's get into it. Javed Iqbal was born sometime around 1961 in Pakistan. It's hard to say exactly when, as different sources list his age of death as anywhere between 38 and 40. He was known for being an extremely violent man, even as a child. As such, he grew up with a really bad temper. He would often pick fights with people just for fun. On top of this, he was reported to have a sexual appetite that seemed bottomless. This resulted in him having frequent affairs outside of his marriage. To make matters worse, he struggled financially and would regularly lose his job due to his hot-headedness. All of these factors would come together later in life and form a deadly cocktail that would result in the deaths of over 100 children. In the early 1990s, Iqbal moved to a house in the city of Lahore that had a large, dilapidated bathroom attached to it. Soon after he moved in, local residents began to notice that he was bringing large numbers of young boys back to the property. For a while, no one thought much of it, but then several of those boys were never seen leaving the house again. Eventually, their families would report them missing. However, by the time the police began investigating, there was no trace of the boys or any sign of foul play. In fact, for many years, no one knew what had happened to them or if they were even dead. But finally, in July of 1999, a breakthrough came. A missing persons report had been filed for a boy named Amir Raza. The police had found his body in a drain close to Iqbal's home. They had caught Javed Iqbal trying to escape in a taxi. When questioned about Azam's disappearance, he claimed innocence. But soon enough, evidence began to surface that proved otherwise. A neighbor testified that she had seen the two of them together on the day of Azam's disappearance. A friend of Iqbal's also came forward and told the police that he had heard Iqbal confess to the murders. With all this evidence, the police arrested Iqbal and took him into custody. At first, he denied everything. But once they began to question him about other missing boys, he broke down and gave a full confession. He revealed that since 1991, he had lured over 100 boys to his home under the false pretense of giving them money for odd jobs. Once inside, he would beat them, burn them with hot oil, and then force them to sleep with him. If they resisted, he would cut off their limbs or throw them in the nearby drain. After his confession, the authorities conducted a search of his property and discovered a small brick in the backyard. They also found some bones and teeth hidden inside a sack. When asked, Javed admitted that this belonged to one of his victims, but he couldn't remember which one. DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to one of the missing boys, and that was just the beginning. As the trial drew on, more and more bodies were uncovered on Iqbal's property. In total, the police found the remains of 17 boys there. Evidence from these cases, combined with Iqbal's confession, led to him being convicted of 13 murders. He was acquitted in the other cases due to a lack of evidence. However, given the nature of his crimes, he was given the death sentence. And he was to die in a manner similar to that in which he had tortured his victims. The public outcry over Iqbal's crimes was enormous. People demanded that he be put to death immediately, and while they waited, they protested outside the prison where he was being held, calling for justice for the victims. There was so much anger towards him that some people even offered to help carry out his punishment. The judge who presided over his case said that although the sentence was mandatory, normally the court would allow the convict to choose between hanging and death by firing squad. But in this case, given the monstrous and sadistic acts committed by the killer, no such consideration would be given. Tikbong's lawyers tried appealing the sentence, but the government rejected this, saying that the sentence was appropriate given the circumstances of the crime. So on October 9, 2001, Javed Iqbal was taken to the gallows. There had been some discussion about whether or not to allow media cameras to film the execution, but in the end, it was decided that it should go ahead. Television cameras were set up, and a crowd of about 1,000 people gathered outside the jail to watch the proceedings. They were also able to hear the screams of the dying man through loudspeakers. Iqbal's execution was carried out by a team of 6 hangmen, 5 of whom were volunteers. The 6th was a professional. He was reportedly paid 2,500 rupees, about $40, for his services. Iqbal himself had requested that he be allowed to pray before the execution, and this was granted. An imam recited verses from the Quran while he prostrated himself on a green prayer mat. Once he had finished, he was made to stand in front of the trapdoor. The executioner adjusted the noose and told him to take a deep breath and close his eyes. As the minutes ticked by, anticipation grew outside the jail. People began chanting, "Death to the murderer," and a few threw stones at the building. Then suddenly, the trapdoor opened and Iqbal fell. Strangely though, instead of breaking his neck, the noose only managed to leave him unconscious. After he fell, the hangman began beating him with heavy wooden clubs. Each blow landed reverberating across the prison yard. They hit him on the head, shoulders, and back until his body was covered in bruises. Some reports claim that they also smashed his jaw and kneecapped him. And it seems that this part of the punishment was broadcast live to the media. One journalist who witnessed the scene described it as the worst punishment I've ever seen. Another said that the condemned man's screams were echoing in our ears long after we left the jail. Still, despite all this, Iqbal survived for another 12 minutes. During that time, he was given mouth-to-nose resuscitation several times, and his heart was pounded in an attempt to restart it. But none of it worked. He was eventually pronounced dead at 6:25 a.m. Afterwards, his body was handed over to his family, who buried him in the village of his wife's parents. Despite being dead, who still caused trouble, though, as people living near the graveyard complained of foul smells coming from it. According to them, these were the stench of burning flesh and human excrement. This led to the authorities exhuming the body and dumping it in an unknown location. So, what do you think? Was this kind of punishment fair, considering the crimes committed, or do you think that it was excessive? Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching.